Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I am really looking forward to this time that we have a chance to be together and talk a little bit about crystal healing and how to work with stones and crystals to support body, mind, spirit shifts that we are in the process of working on for ourselves, and also perhaps with friends and family and others as well. For those of you who are new to this channel or new to my work, I'm Mary Jo Feely. I'm the owner of Fourth Dimension Healing in Stillwater, Minnesota, where I offer healing touch, Usui Reiki, energy healing, and crystal healing energy sessions. And then also I have a gemstone shop and also online that you're always able to explore to learn more about perhaps the stones you have, as much as some of the gemstones and crystals that I have to offer. I also am the director of the Center for Crystalline Healing Studies, which is my online school. And at this school, I have created a number of courses that are self-paced, many of which combine both self-paced online course lessons as well as one-on-one mentoring time with me, either in person or distant remote, depending on what your preference is. And so you can find more information out about that by visiting my website. So in preparation for this evening, I have asked for questions, and I've had a number of questions come in. I'm also going to be working with the chat from time to time and checking over to see if any of you also have chat questions. And if so, I will be addressing those. If we run out of time, if we come to the end of our hour and your question has not been answered, I will reach out directly to you, because I really do want you to have a sense of how to work with crystals and gemstones to support your own healing and how to address some of the questions that are arising for you. This video is being live streamed right now to my YouTube channel, and it will also be available moving forward. Please know that I have set up this evening's video so that you are not able to have your image or your name seen publicly, so as to provide some privacy for you. I would like, I believe, to just go ahead and start with one of the best questions I think I've ever been asked, and that is the question that is, I'm just starting to learn about crystals and stones, and there are so many to choose from. How do I know where to start? My first reply usually is that start with the stone that you're drawn to. And now, of course, with that being said, there are some ways that we can work specifically with gemstones and crystals to support this holistic approach to healing that so many of us are really being drawn to. So two options come to my mind. And the first one is to take a look at the types of stones that can work with our physical reality. So we have a physical body, we have lots of emotions, we have lots of thoughts, and then we have these inspirations, these brilliant ideas that sometimes just drop into our head. And so when we take a look at the various ways that wellness and also dis-ease shows up, we can take a look at these basic physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of our health. To do that, I think it's really helpful to work with the elements. And the elements that I work with in my healing practice and in my crystal healing work are the elements of earth, fire, water, wind, and storm. And if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, I have a number of different videos about how to work with these elements as it relates to crystal healing. So you may want to take a look at those. So when I am thinking about how to work with the elements, I have several approaches, and one of which is to let's take a look, first of all, at the physical body. how are we feeling? Are we physically well? Are we tired? Are we feeling stressed? Are we eating too much or perhaps not eating enough? And so we can take a look at how is our physical body actually manifesting wellness. To get in touch with physical healing and to work with a gemstone or crystal to support physical healing, we can work with a stone that resonates with the earth element. And this is a piece of Shungite. And I'll be talking a little bit more about Shungite because it came up with another really good question too. Shungite is a stone that resonates with this earth element, and the earth element is about physicality. It is about feeling really solid in our bones, feeling like we've got our feet underneath us, and having good physical wellness. So when we're beginning to start working with stones, and if we are perhaps experiencing aches and pains and it's just an unsettledness in our physical body, working with a stone that resonates with the earth element can be really helpful. The next element that I always think about and go to is fire. Now, fire is this really wonderful energy of creative, manifesting, kind of lots of action going on when we're talking about fire. Fire also ties in with irritability. It ties in with our digestive system. It ties in with our mental processing. And so if we're experiencing kind of repetitive thoughts or worries or regrets, and we're kind of in this ongoing loop, especially when it comes to some of the thought processes that can be a little stressful. And these days we have lots of that going on. Working with a stone that resonates with fire can be very helpful. And here is an example of a fire stone, and it is carnelian. A carnelian is a form of agate, and so some carnelian will be very consistently orange and almost glossy, and others will be very banded with whites and creams and some orange hues. So all of it is within the species, let's call it a species of a carnelian, and all resonate with that fire element. So this would be an example of a stone that we could work with. I'm just checking the chat to see. So far, so good. The next element that really comes into play is the element of water. Now, water element rules and governs and supports emotional healing. We are in year 2 of a pandemic. We are all stressed. We have all had our world literally turned upside down. And it is really a time when many of us are feeling overwhelmed. Perhaps we're experiencing more sadness or more anxiety. And we're really seeking a way to calm and restore that sense of balance within our own mind and within our own being. Working with a stone that resonates with the water element can be really helpful. And here's an example of rose quartz. Rose quartz is one of the forms of quartz. There are 5 types of quartz within the quartz family. Rose quartz is what is known as a cryptocrystalline quartz, which means at a microscopic level, you can see all the hexagonal crystalline structure, but it's not visible with the naked eye the way it might be in some other pieces of quartz where you see them forming these very nice 6-sided points or terminations. I want you to notice that the stones I work with, they're not particularly big. You don't need a large stone to be able to have really amazing results. So work with the stones you have. Sometimes you might find it helpful to have a larger stone, like I have a piece of blue calcite here tonight. But many times it is going to be a very small piece that you're going to find yourself working with. The next element that I think can be really helpful when we are addressing a holistic approach to healing and working with crystals is wind element. Now, wind is that inspiration. It is this ability to really have clarity. And we all, of course, know there are times when we have no clarity at all. We really are very uncertain about what to do or what's happening. And we're really processing and chewing on various aspects of life. Working with a gemstone or crystal that resonates with the wind element can be particularly helpful. In this case, I have a piece of amethyst. Now here again, it's a small piece. It does not need to be a very large piece. Amethyst is another example of one of the 5 members of the quartz family. And you can see that this one is very overtly hexagonal. It has these very observable sides that the rose quartz you can only see at the microscopic level. So working with wind to clear, to bring a calmness into that mind space can be really helpful. The final element that I work with, which really isn't an element as much as it is an experience really, is the element of storm. And storm comes in when there's this transformational event taking place and there's balance within one's being of all the other elements. And so working with storm can be a wonderful way to bring it all together. So let's say you've been working with some earth stones because you've had some aches and pains, and you've also perhaps have a new job and you are trying to sort out all the new things that you're doing with your job and your brain is really full. You can bring a wind and an earth stone together, and then you can work with quartz. And here is another example of the 6-sided hexagonal shape of a quartz crystal. So that's one approach to how to work with stones, and a good way to start. Now, the other way is to consider that we have 7 energy centers, also known as chakras, and chakra is a Sanskrit word that simply means wheel. So we have a number of different energy centers that run up and down the spine. And if you're not familiar with those, I have a video about how to work with those for healing and working with stones as well. When we look at the 7 chakras, and I would like to say here for a moment is that the 7 chakra model is a model of interpreting the human energy field that we're fairly familiar with in the West, but it is by no means the only way to understand and interpret the energy field. So keep that in mind, that while I will be talking about 7 major energy centers or chakras that tie in with health throughout our body and mind and spirit, that these are particular for the chakras. So let's start back with the earth and with that sense of grounding. Let's say you have that new job and you're kind of trying to get your feet sorted underneath you. Working with an earth stone is going to be helpful to get those feet anchored beneath you. Here is a piece of red jasper. There are many, many stones that you can work with that are really accessible, easy to find, and affordable. You don't have to go to a very rare stone to find some really amazing stones to work with. So red jasper would be one that you can work with. If we were to take a look at that 2nd chakra, this is a chakra of creativity. And if you remember, that's what fire is about. And just as before, my go-to stone for the 2nd chakra is carnelian. It's a wonderful way to bring in this creative manifesting kind of energy into that 2nd chakra. Now, the 2nd chakra is where we hold emotions. And so if we're feeling overly emotional or perhaps underly emotional, maybe we're holding all of our emotions in, we can work with a stone that supports that 2nd chakra, in this case, carnelian. It can be really helpful. The 3rd chakra is in the upper abdomen, just around that pit of your stomach. This is an energy center of thinking and thought. We all have been hearing more and more about having a gut brain as much as we have a brain in our head. And so we have a lot of mental activity that takes place in our digestive system and in our upper abdomen. I like working with a stone that is known as tiger's eye. This is golden tiger's eye. To me, tiger's eye draws frequencies of earth up and frequencies of sun down. So we get this really balancing of this grounding energy of the earth, and then this like really powerful hot energy drawing that down together. Working with a stone like tiger's eye can be very helpful if we're working with digestive issues, if we are working with maybe a sense of just worry and angst and we're nervous a lot. Working with tiger's eye can be helpful. The heart is next, and the heart chakra is a place out of which we would like to live. We would love to be able to live compassionately out of a place of centeredness and peace and calming. And yet, as humans, we go in and out of balance all the time. That sense of total balance is momentary because then nature shifts us one way or the other. We are not a stagnant being. And so keep that in mind as you're doing your healing works, so that when it feels like, oh, I feel like I'm going backwards, this isn't working, you're just shifting. And so it's okay. Let yourself shift and be very fluid about that. I go back again to rose quartz. Here is an example of a tumbled piece of rose quartz. Again, not really big. You definitely can have a large piece of rose quartz. When a client comes to my office, I have a piece of rose quartz that's larger that is underneath the chair upon which they sit, so that they are able to receive that vibration of that rose quartz while they're sitting and talking with me. So there are ways to work with the stones, and I'll get to that because that was actually a question that came up too, is how to work with stones. And we'll get back to that a little bit later. But for now, just be mindful that working with these stones and having these stones with you is going to be helpful. Now we move up into the throat. The throat is the center through which we express ourselves. It may be verbally, as I am now, or it may be that I'm working on creating a new recipe and I know it's not quite right, and then I've got it. And I'm able to write it down, and I'm able to repeat it, and I'm able to share it. That's expressing also. All comes out of the throat chakra. And so the throat chakra, I find, really resonates a lot with water and with the ability to have flowing, easy communication. I like to use a piece of Amazonite, which is one of the stones that is, first of all, accessible, reasonably priced, and able to support the clearing out and the balancing of that throat chakra. We all have experienced times when we've needed to say something and it was really difficult, or we had a really important thing that we needed to do and speak to, and then we wake up with laryngitis or a sore throat. Those are real visible and tangible examples of when that throat chakra can go in and out of balance. Moving up into this brow space. This is a space, as I mentioned before, about clarity. It is about insight. It is about kind of aha. You get this kind of inspiration. Sodalite is a stone that resonates with the wind element, and wind moves up in this head space. Working with something as fairly common as sodalite, very powerful, very helpful. If you have a prayer or meditation practice and you're feeling a bit stuck, it may be that sodalite or another stone similar to sodalite could be really helpful. It could also be that what you're really dealing with is kind of getting things settled underneath you so that you can settle into a meditation. So then that might be when you go back to an earth stone such as red jasper. The very top of the head is the crown chakra. The crown chakra is essentially where this higher divine insight and this higher spiritual frequency drops down into our energy field and into our chakra column. Working with a stone like amethyst. You saw a pointed one before, and this is a small piece of tumbled amethyst. Can be really helpful. So those are two different approaches to answering the question. I'm just starting to learn about stones and crystals. Where do I start? Now, there is another question that I think ties in really nicely right now. And that question is, if I want to start with only one gemstone, what stone should that be? My answer would be, go right back and check in with yourself. Is it a physical issue? Is it a mental issue, an emotional issue, a sense of a spiritual issue? Get a sense of where that is first, and then think about what might be helpful for you. It may be that the stone that would be most helpful might be a piece of red jasper because you realize that you need to be settled. And maybe you have a piece of red jasper and then that's the best stone. If you really have no stones and you really want to get started, two come to mind, and we've already actually discussed them. One of them is amethyst, because amethyst supports the balancing of all of the chakras. It certainly does resonate with wind, and so it tends to be very helpful if we're working with energies up in the mind and brain and this upper brow and crown chakras. This is a beautiful stone to work with anytime. And the other is clear quartz. Clear quartz resonates with actually storm. So here it brings that transformational energy in. It also balances all the chakras. So the beauty of working with a stone that balances all the chakras is we don't have to overthink it. I think that's the most important thing that we can take away from any time we're working with stones, is not to overthink it. Go with what we're drawn to. It simply might be that you just keep noticing this stone that's sitting on your dresser that you picked up on a walk a couple weeks ago, then for sure that's the stone you're going to want to work with. Okay, so those, I'm hoping, are a couple ways for you to see how I would answer a couple of these really important questions. Let me just check the chat window. Okay, good. Here is a question that I really appreciated hearing about. Are there some stones that are helpful if I'm sick with a cold or flu? Now, this is so timely because I get a lot of questions asked to me, what's the best stone to deal with COVID? Well, first of all, there isn't a stone on the planet that's going to be able to support and heal COVID or any other infectious disease or infectious process that we're going through. This is why it's really important to remember that crystal healing is considered alternative and complementary. It is not meant to replace allopathic conventional medicine. It's used as a complement to it. So when I think of stones that can support a person who's experiencing a cold and the flu, two things come to mind right away. When we have energetic imbalances, whether it's caused from stress or whether it's caused from some kind of a virus or a bacteria, the reality is once it settles into our physical body, we need to address it from a physical level. We still can work at an energetic level. However, because the density or the energies and frequencies of that particular illness or disease or condition have slowed enough and become dense enough that they now are in our physical body, which means in our cells, in our muscles, in our respiratory tract, in our GI tract, wherever it has settled, That's where we now, I believe, begin to start working back with stones that resonate with the earth. Because if we can have a strong connection with the earth, we're going to connect with the earth's electromagnetic field. That will help support our immune system because we will actually be able to connect with more vital energy that comes from the earth. And then from there, our immune system can become stronger. We will feel more relaxed, which means we breathe easier. And then our cells function better because they're getting more oxygen. And it's a cascade effect all the way through the way our entire body heals itself. The other thing strong earth energy stones do is help create a really strong energy field. And it does that by helping our energy field resonate with the same frequency of the earth so that we are less likely to pick up other viruses, other energetic imbalances that may be coming from somebody else. We may even notice that when we feel stronger, we're less thrown off if somebody's in a bad mood. And if they're feeling strong, they're less thrown off when we're the one experiencing a bad mood. So the two earth element stones that really come to mind for me, first one is green moss agate. Green moss agate has this wonderful ability to draw this nurturing earth energy. Now, those of us in the Northern Hemisphere are winding down winter. We cannot get to spring quite fast enough because we many times are really missing that connection that we receive outdoors when we're in nature. That's the same connection that a stone that resonates with the earth, and particularly green moss agate, has this wonderful ability to draw that nurturing energy of the earth up, and actually draws it all the way up into that heart space so that we really can draw it up and then from there settle into a place of healing. The other stone that I think is really helpful is pyrite. Now, pyrite, you may know it as fool's gold, is loaded with iron. It is very, very strongly grounding and helps us really connect with that iron within our body. In fact, all of the crystals and gemstones that we work with, that I'll talk about tonight, and certainly that we work with and are experiencing, have minerals within them that are also minerals that we have within our body. So that as the pyrite and its strong magnetic frequencies move into our energetic field, then they connect up with that space between the physical and the non-physical. And that's how they blend and connect up with the physical reality. So if we think of a body, and then we think of a cell, then we think of a molecule, and we go deeper and we go into the subatomic particles within the nucleus of that molecule. And that's where the subtle energy field connects. And then from there, we go into what's known as the subtle energy field. So it's that intracellular level where this connection is happening. So this is not just I feel like I really wish my body was feeling better, so I'm going to carry some pyrite because Mary Jo said once in one of her videos that that was a good idea. It's not about that. It's about you allowing yourself to connect with the pyrite and welcome in the healing. So I hope that's a way for you to understand what crystal healing can do and where it definitely has a line that we don't cross when we talk about a particular stone perhaps being able to heal a particular malady. Another question that came up, which I found I could really relate to this question because it's one that I personally deal with. And the question is, what is a best crystal for aiding in a good night's sleep? So there's, like I mentioned, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're hoping it's on the downswing. It looks like it is. And there's just a whole lot of topsy-turvy wildness going on in our world and in our life, and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of suffering. And so we can carry a lot of that to bed. So I am looking, here they are. There are some stones particularly that I wanted to talk about when it comes to how to support good sleep. As I mentioned before with cellular healing, if we can relax, if our brain can calm down, we're able to get into that state of rest and repair. And in fact, we actually have an autonomic nervous system. It's like the part of our nervous system that's automatic. It's what drives breathing. It drives running when there's a tiger and relaxing on a beach. So the beauty of the autonomic nervous system is that we're either running or we're on the beach. We can't be doing both at the same time. And so the stones I'm going to talk about are the ones that help support that calming, that resting, that allowing, and that rejuvenation and healing. One stone that I think is one of the Cadillac stones when it comes to working with calming the mind and sleeping is Lepidolite. Now, Lepidolite is a stone that has a fair amount of lithium in it, and lithium is a calming mineral. Allowing this to perhaps be slipped inside the pillowcase is a wonderful way to rest with the energy of Lepidolite. Now, when it comes to working with crystals, it's important that we remember not to say to the Lepidolite, I hear you're really good at helping me sleep, and throw it in the pillowcase, but rather, thank you for bringing your gifts to me. I will rest with you. And I sleep almost every night with some kind of a stone in my pillowcase. And there's something about being able to bring that hand up in the middle of the night as I'm readjusting a pillow and feel that little crystal friend there. So Lepidolite is definitely one that I would say is really helpful. This resonates with water. And as we think about it, many times a good night's sleep doesn't happen because our emotions are kind of rocky. Another water element stone is ruby fusite. Now, I like ruby fusite because it's got this wonderful calming energy, and yet it's got some little bits of ruby, which are actually an earth stone, and that can help really settle that calm mind a little bit deeper into the cellular structure of the physical body as well. So those are two. And then there's selenite. Now, selenite is a stone that resonates with wind, so it's really about mental clearing, and it's also really helpful for skeletal structure. So if a person's having trouble sleeping because they have some aches and pains, the selenite might be really helpful. And I brought a couple pieces just for us to take a peek at. Here is a small piece. Now, selenite is also known as gypsum. There are varying hardnesses of gemstones and crystals, ranging from 0, which is actually talc, is the base point for all of the grading of hardness, all the way up to diamond. Selenite is 2 on the scale, which means a fingernail will scratch it. It's very, very soft. And so it's important to remember also that you don't want to get this wet because it gets really mushy and it's not going to do very well. So keep it in a dry place. Just don't soak it in water. You'll kind of wreck your selenite. Another way is working with a wand of selenite or a blade. This is a little bit longer. I've actually used, I think, this same piece, perhaps another piece, in one of my videos when I talked about selenite, because it can be really helpful for clearing off the energy field. I usually run it just above the body a few inches. So if you are anticipating that you're going to want to have a little bit of a restful sleep and you're not feeling quite in that place, you could perhaps work with a piece of selenite to do some clearing energetically around your physical body in that subtle energy field before going to sleep. If you don't have a longer piece, you can use a small piece, same way, just run it over your body. I think it's really important that we don't get all wrapped up in the idea of if we don't have the right stone, it's not going to work. And that's just not accurate. It can be a very small piece. It can be a very large piece. It can be a long piece or a short piece. To work with the stone and work with the intention of what you're asking the stone to help you heal is most important, because you are the healer. The stone is supporting you. If you work with me as a crystal healer or as an energy healer, I'm supporting you. You're the healer. Everything else is facilitating that. So I hope that is an answer to that question. One question that I received, I really appreciated, and I appreciated them all, but I thought this was really helpful. And it says, you said in one of your videos that when we put a stone in our pocket, that we need to work with it. What do you mean by that? How do I work with the stone? That's a great question. And sometimes when we begin to work with stones, we start realizing that it's not as complicated as we thought, but it's helpful to have some guidelines. So let me give you some guidelines. I've already given you an example of if you have selenite, you can use it to clear your energy field. So we can work with a stone to bring healing into any aspect of our being. And one of the most important things is to first and foremost develop a relationship with your stone. I do have a video actually that speaks to how to work with gemstones and crystals. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to take a look at that, because I think you might get more of your questions answered. So I have a piece of hematite. Hematite, like pyrite, is iron ore. And certainly here in Minnesota, if you live in Minnesota, we have a lot of iron ore in the northern part of our state. So iron ore, hematite or hematite, is a wonderful earth stone. And I want to use this as an example of how to work with this. First of all, we want to develop a relationship with it. So I would encourage you, whenever you get a new gemstone or crystal, to spend a few moments with it. If it's physically dirty, clean it off. If it's a piece of selenite, don't use water, but use a cloth so you can get rid of some of the physical dust. It's taken a while, perhaps, for the stone that you're holding to actually land in your hands. It's been through a lot. It's been mined, it's been transported, it's been handled a lot, and none of that is inherently bad. Yet we can go ahead and energetically clear it just to help that stone come back to its true resonance. The easiest way to do this is to hold it in your hands, cup your hands, bring your hands near or around your heart, and simply focus on your breath. Bring compassion into your heart space, and then share that compassionate energy, that compassionate gift with the stone. That's a beautiful way to begin to connect with the stone. You're clearing it, you're bringing it back to its natural state of energetic frequency. You can do that with your voice. You can tone, and it doesn't have to be pretty. You could crank up a loud rock music song and put that stone in front, anything to kind of jolt it, in a sense, back into its natural rhythm would be appropriate. The other thing you can do even more deeply, if you have a prayer or meditation practice, is to actually sit with your stone. Sit with your stone, focus on it, and ask it to introduce itself to you. When I do this, each stone, regardless of whether or not it's the same type of a stone, is going to have a different response for me. For example, here are the two pieces of amethyst that we talked about a little bit ago. Both are essentially amethyst. However, when I work with this one and then this one, I'm going to have a different response to the actual energy of that particular stone or crystal. Just like the earth is filled with human beings, we're not all the same. And so it's an opportunity for you to touch into what was my experience like, perhaps with this particular stone. Then you can slip it under your pillow. You can wear it in your pocket or a pouch. I have a very small little velvet pouch that I've had for years that I often will put a stone in, and then I will put it kind of through my belt loop so that it can stay at my hip and I don't have to worry that it's going to slide out when I sit down. My recommendation when you're working with stones to don't load your pockets. So let's say you decide you want to work with these 7 stones because these are the ones that work with all the chakras. You know, there's a lot here. They're kind of heavy and it might be a lot to sort out. The important thing when you're working with a stone is what is your response to the stone? If you have a bad headache and you're feeling like, oh, I've got to get this energy, I've got to release this energy, and then you work with hematite, and then hematite helps you ground that energy, then you've learned how that can be helpful. But if you're working with 3 other stones at the same time, you're not sure which one helped you ground that energy and help that headache dissipate. So I hope that helps you understand that as simply as carrying it in your pocket, sleeping with it, meditating with it, important thing is that you're connecting with the actual stone or crystal itself and letting it develop a relationship with you. So then when you've got that headache again and you've got 4 pieces of hematite, you remember which one helped you because that's the one that taught you how to do the healing around that headache. Which brings me to mind, I think it's helpful to have a journal, a place to write down the work you do with your stones. And I would say it's really helpful to dedicate a journal just for your crystal work. So if I'm going to work with this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to describe it in my book, in my journal, so I know its characteristics, so I can remember which of the 3 or 4 hematite I may happen to have, and I can find the correct one. I actually want to learn about it. Tell me more about its chemical composition, its mineral composition. And if you're really interested in learning more about that, let me know. You can send me an email. You can go on my website and send me a chat, and I will hook you up with a couple links of some really good websites that can take you into that more scientific mineral database. So that, I think, is an example of how to work with the crystals and gemstones. So I hope that answers that question. Here is another question. Sometimes I feel scattered and have a hard time staying on task. What stone would you recommend? Well, 2 things come to mind right away. We already heard about feeling scattered, and so sometimes that scatteredness can be because there's overactive brain activity. It could be that we're super anxious and kind of anticipating something, or we just can't concentrate because our anxiety and our worries are a little bit in the forefront. So keeping that in mind, you can always go back to, is this a stone that would, or is this a situation that would benefit from an earth stone or a fire stone? With this question though, I'm going to go to 2 stones. One is going to be blue calcite. This is a smaller version of this. Calcite is a premier clearing stone, so it's going to really work on clearing the energy field. It's an earth stone, and also calcite comes in various colors due to the additional minerals within the stone, and blue calcite really helps support overactive wind and mind energy. And so in this case, working with that kind of scatteredness, scatteredness and hard staying on task can be really helpful by working with something as readily available as blue calcite. The other stone that I think is really a spot-on stone to work with when we have this overactive mind energy is fluorite. Now, this is a piece of rainbow fluorite. And in this particular piece, you can actually see there's banding. Rainbow fluorite has a wide range of colors from almost creamy, clear, yellow, all the way through deep purple. However, if you get a piece of rainbow fluorite and it's one color, it's still rainbow fluorite. It's just that particular piece of rainbow fluorite came out of the band that was that more uniform color. So there is this wide range of colors that you can find rainbow fluorite in. Fluorite is a really, I would say, rock solid stone for working with an overactive mind. While it doesn't look it, rainbow fluorite is a cubic isometric structure. It actually is in the form of a cube. So is the pyrite. At a structural level, all those molecules align in a cube form. So that in and of itself, to me, is another factor as to why fluorite can be so helpful in stabilizing an overactive, scattered mind, because that cubic structure in and of itself calls in this structured kind of contained energy. And so that's another reason why I think it's really a really helpful stone to work with for this reason. As I look down here, of course, I can see any other number of stones that could be helpful. One stone I would say that if we were super, super, super scattered, I probably wouldn't necessarily work with right away would be clear quartz. Now here's another example of clear quartz. You can see it's got this kind of hexagonal six-sided structures, even though they're not always going to be all the same size. This is storm, this is transformational. It might be a little bit too active right away when you're having a scattered mind. This might be a nice stone to follow up with when you have gotten that scatteredness settled down. Amethyst, here's another example of amethyst. Oops, almost dropped it. Again, a stone that can be really calming for the mind, yet this sense of scatteredness, I think, really begs us to think about getting our feet underneath us. When we think about the elements, earth, fire, water, and wind, earth is always going to balance anything that's out of sorts. So keep that in mind anytime you can go to an earth stone. So if you have, let's say you have this little set of like, and this actually is part of a set I offer. It's a basic crystal toolkit set. And this is the starting example. If you even have something like this, work with the earth stone. I think that would be most helpful to get you settled. Then open up into some of these other stones. Now there's another question that came in, and it's actually really a really important question to talk about. And the question is, I work at a computer all day and often feel drained by the time I go home. Is there a stone that I can use that will help me in that situation? So there are two questions actually here, or actually I should say two things we should consider. One is the sense of feeling drained. certainly that can happen because of the electronics that we're around. We're around computers, smartphones, overhead lights. I mean, everything's electronic. It's hard to find an appliance that's not electronic. And so we do have a lot of electromagnetic frequency disruption within our environment. And so that I will address in a moment. The other thing I'm going to suggest is, let's say that we're at the computer all day, and that computer happens to be in an office or a hospital or a school setting or a business setting, somewhere where we're around a lot of people. It could also be that some of why we're feeling drained is because of the sheer exposure we've had to a lot of other people's energy fields all day long. If that's the case, I would go back to pyrite. Pyrite, again, very, very helpful for establishing a very strong energy field. And it creates this protective field around us. And by protective, I don't mean it's like keeping all the, bad stuff out. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having a strong energetic field around us so that we are more clearly aware of what is ours and what is not ours, so that we can listen and not take another person's suffering or their concerns or their worries on to the point of not being helpful to either them or to ourselves. So with this question, if you're the person who asked it, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for asking this. And to tease that drained piece apart just a little bit more. So now let's talk about the electromagnetic clutter that is in our environment. The stone that I believe is the most helpful is actually not a stone at all. It's not a crystal at all. It's considered a mineraloid, and that is Shungite. Now, we've already mentioned Shungite as part of this earth piece before. Here is another example of Shungite. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about Shungite. It really is a very important stone to work with. This is what is known as elite Shungite. Very metallic. Shungite comes out of Russia in a particular region of Karelia, and it has been around for hundreds of years of known existence of the healing properties of Shungite. In fact, it goes back millennia, and it's only now that we are becoming more fully aware of the healing properties of Shungite and what some of those healing properties are based upon. So there are a number of different kinds of Shungite. These are the two more common Shungites. This is considered elite, noble, or type 1 Shungite. This is very, very light. It is about 97 to 98% pure carbon. And the fascinating thing about Shungite is it contains all the elements in the periodic table are contained within Shungite. So it's just this really phenomenal substance. I say it's a mineraloid because it was formed millions of years ago out of organic matter. That is why it's almost 100% carbon, because out of organic matter is where carbon is based. This is considered type 2 Shungite, also known as regular Shungite. It's probably anywhere from 48 to maybe 60, maybe 70% pure carbon. It also has some other minerals in it. And the thing I like about the regular or type 2 Shungite is it's dense enough to be shaped and carved. So for example, if you were curious, you could go out onto my online shop and you can see different spheres, different pyramids, different shapes, many of which emanate out this ability to offset and stabilize and neutralize electromagnetic frequency distortions, and some radiate out quite far. So if you're curious about what that's like, you can go ahead and take a look on my online shop. It'll talk about the size of the sphere, for example, and how many meters out it will shed and share its electromagnetic field balancing. I typically have a piece of elite Shungite sitting next to my computer. I often will wear a piece as a pendant. This is very friable, so I would not put this in my pocket for fear when I stood up, I would have two pieces because it would have broken while I was sitting down. So be very mindful of that. So Shungite has within it fullerenes, and fullerenes are microscopic little spheres or elongated little spaces that are filled with this ability to heal and address free radicals. And so this is part of why Shungite is really becoming much more understood and well known now as a healing mineral. The other thing that you may read about is that people can put this in their bath, they can put it in their drinking water. If you were going to work with any kind of Shungite to put it in your water to get these really strong healing benefits, I would only work with elite Shungite, and I would not put it directly into my water. I would put it perhaps in a little jar and then put the jar into a pitcher of water so that no filaments come off and get into the water and we ingest them. So that's really important for you to be aware of. Perhaps next month when we meet again and I offer another Q&A, maybe there will be some more questions related to how to work with crystals and stones when it comes to drinking or putting them in water. And I'm very conservative when it comes to that. And I don't believe in putting anything directly into the water that we drink. It's just that there's too much of a likelihood that there could be a little chip, or some of these stones have been handled a lot and have been exposed to various chemicals to get them really nice and shiny and pretty. And so just be mindful of that. Even as I look right down here, there are little pieces of the stones that I've been working with just while we've been talking, little tiny flecks. We wouldn't want to get those into your, we wouldn't want to drink those or get those into our physical body. So I think these questions have been fabulous. We've had a chance to take a look at some basic ways to work with the stones, a little bit of honing into some specific issues such as sleeping, such as perhaps when we're physically ill, how to work on clearing some of the environment within the understanding of how to work with gemstones and crystals. And so I really am really grateful for the questions and for your presence during this time. I really look forward to next month. I will be sending out more information, so watch for that in the next 3 weeks. And then I will be posting this video onto YouTube, and I will have the next date for our next Q&A also posted there. So send me an email if you have any questions that have arisen as you have been listening to what I've had to say. And I really encourage you to explore the stones you have. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, your inner healer. Go into your heart space and heal body, mind, and spirit with the stone spirits as well. Many blessings. Be well.